A week ago, we learned that a 14-year-old boy accused of playing a part in one of the deadliest shootings in the district in years was not actually involved in the murders, according to the police. Mr. Attorney General, you said that mistakes were made. Can you walk us through those mistakes and where the case is going from here?
What happened was a terrible tragedy. There was the shooting. The cops gave chase to a car with these 4 individuals in the car. The car was chased into Maryland, back into D.C. The car crashed. The individuals in the car fled. The cops continued the pursuit on foot. They went into a rec center. Walk into the rec center, and this kid, this 14-year-old kid who was arrested, threw up his hands. And he threw up his hands not because he was involved in the shootings, but because he was an abscondent. He was an escapee from the DYRS, the city juvenile system.
Who had nevertheless registered for the program in which he was in the rec center.
He had, and what happened, though, was that he had registered only moments before he entered. In any event, it was a confluence of events. What happened thereafter, and the mistake was terrible, but the follow-through was commendable by the police and the Attorney General's office, and that is no one rested on the probable cause hearing because, Kojo, there was a probable cause hearing. The judge found probable cause for this individual to be jailed. Interviews started, and there's been some reporting in the press recently about a particular set of interviews with one of the 5 individuals. It was determined then that we would expedite, which we did in one day, the completion of the fingerprints, and the fingerprints cleared this individual. We then had to go to court the next morning to speak about this individual publicly because he's 14 years old. One of the newspapers in town had breached the D.C. code about announcing this individual's name. We had a press conference the next day. 2 of the 3 outstanding individuals who were wanted were picked up. Since then, the 3rd individual is picked up. We're confident we have all of the individuals. This individual has been released.
It was aggressive policing. You want people in the wake of particularly a horrendous crime like that, you want the police to go out quickly, round up the suspects, not just the usual suspects, but anybody they can. And did the police do anything wrong in doing what they did, rather than making a mistake? I mean, was there some procedural error on their part?
I don't really see it. The individual who was arrested had dreadlocks. 2 of the individuals who were in the escaping car had dreadlocks. The officer ran into the rec center, and the kid throws his hands up. And that took everybody aback. And then the individual, unfortunately, was arrested. I said in a perfect world it wouldn't have happened, but it did. We corrected it promptly, and we went immediately to the public to announce we had made a mistake and freed the individual from this charge.
And is that 14-year-old, and NBC4's policy has been not to say his name, so I'm not going to say his name either, but is he now released, or is he in custody on other charges? There
are other charges, and he's been removed back to DYRS, the youth agency that deals with these issues. He has somewhat of a record.
Okay.
It was only last week that a lot of people were saying that this case was the perfect storm scenario for the city's juvenile crime laws because of the limited options that judges have to keep violent young offenders off the street and under their control. And how do you see this issue now?
Well, Kojo, I have to say first that I was lead lawyer in the Jerry M. case. Went on for about 20-some years. And one of the basic purposes of the case was to improve the rehabilitation for these kids. We went from a prison, a terrible prison at Oak Hill, to what is called New Beginnings. And there's been some argument about whether there's enough beds at New Beginnings. But we reached a point, I think, where the balance perhaps got a little bit off, and we're trying to restore that balance between rehabilitation and security. The community is demanding security on the streets. And so we've got to be very careful that in the rehab process, we also are sensitive to security, because when the courts commit a kid, the full discretion as to how that kid is housed is with the DYRS, a city agency, and not the courts. And so the courts have been very sensitive about the fact that sometimes mistakes are made.